Hello everyone and welcome to this new video where we go together. It all begins in 1922 in Egypt when the Englishman Howard Carter discovers the incredible tomb of Tutankhamun, the Pharaoh of Egypt of the 18th dynasty with very obscure origins at the time. This discovery will be one of the most incredible discoveries we've ever made in the archaeological world, but it might also be the worst discovery we've ever made. Several historians in Egypt had nevertheless warned them. In those writings speak of an old curse that would affect all those who dared to touch the tomb of the pharaoh while in a truck. Yet archaeologists will not listen to them nor worry about the danger. The discovery is so great and precious it is impossible for them to abandon the research here. In addition, the man who would have financed his research would have specifically asked that the excavations do not stop and that the mummy be taken out of its sarcophagus to ensure that it is indeed everything in a truck. And unfortunately for him, he will be the first to be touched by this terrible curse. A year later, in 1923, he died in the middle. Only a month later, it will be two archaeologists who were present at the site and who also died in strange circumstances. The following year, it will be Professor Wild, one of the first people who returned to the grave to authenticate the discoveries. Unfortunately, he was found hanged, although many say he was not depressed. Shortly after, it will be Mr. Carter, the man who would have done the research to make this famous discovery. He too died in strange circumstances. Then, it is the relatives of the person who financed the research who will be affected. His wife, daughter, and even his nurse were affected by this terrible curse and died shortly after him. Then, it will be Howard Carter's secretary, who also died in strange circumstances shortly after the discovery, and it doesn't stop there. More recently, it would be two conservatives in Cairo who would have been affected by this strange curse. They reportedly died shortly after coming to see the mummy and authorizing its transfer to Europe. In total, even if many remain skeptical, it will be more than 20 deaths that we will be able to connect to this strange mummy and this strange curse. Serial deaths, most of which will remain unexplained. So maybe Pharaoh's revenge all in a truck isn't over. Currently, the mystery continues. It is in the Ötzi Alps, where there are many mountains at more than 3,000 m altitude, that our story begins. On September 19, 1991, hikers make an incredible discovery, a man half buried under the ice. They will call it Ötzi. This man would have been a simple Bronze Age warrior. He died more than 5,300 years ago. His death would have been due to an arrow that would have passed through his skull during one of the battles he would have had better. This already incredible story could have ended there, but we were going to look at a strange curse related to this currency. This curse would have affected all the men who would have come out of his ice sleep on the 10th. It all starts with Helmut Simmons, the man who is said to have discovered the coin at the age of 67, and shortly after making this discovery, he died mysteriously, swept away by the ice during another hike in the Alps. Conrad Spider was the first scientist to examine the mummy, at only 55 years of age, and shortly after examining the mummy, he died of multiple sclerosis, which was detected late and considered to be devastating. Vu Breinerheim, 64, was the first forensic doctor to examine the mummy. He died in a car accident shortly after this examination, while on his way to a conference on the mummy to give his final revelations. Many will suspect that he was prevented from speaking, and it continued with Gottfried, the guide who had led the first part of the expedition and who had helped search for the mummy. He reportedly died at the age of 52 in strange circumstances during an avalanche on another expedition. Then it was Ryan Reisel, the journalist present at the scene, who filmed the exit of the mummy from the ice, who died sometime later from a brain tumor at the age of 47. Tom Lloyd, the archaeologist who had begun work on the mummy, died shortly after his first encounter with Ötzi, from a blood infection. Then it was around Professor Duran Breimer, who had also carried out work on the mummy and who died during an operation sometime later. Finally, it will be Gita van Dijk, the other mountain guide, who will be swept away by a heart attack sometime later, at the age of 45. In the end, anyone who gets close to the mummy will die under strange circumstances or shortly after meeting Ötzi. Today, the mummy is believed to rest in a museum in northern Italy. This museum welcomes more than 250,000 visitors per year. Dai's mummies remain visible through high-security glass. On the other hand, the museum staff has a theory about this famous curse that affects all those who dare to approach the coin. According to them, only the Germans and Austrians were affected by this curse, and no Italian who was present during this expedition will have died from this curse. All the Italians who were present during this expedition would have taken great care of the coin, they would have respected it, and this is also the case at the museum. They would pay special attention to him, they would take care of him. And above all, would not carry out any more medical operations to study it. So according to them, it would be thanks to all this respect and this curse would not have touched them until now. For most scientists, this would not be a curse, but rather a mere coincidence, as most deaths can find a rational explanation. However, in less than 10 years, it will already be 8 people who will have died after having approached or studied at to finish. Since her entry into the museum, she has no more victims. However, if you go there, be careful to respect it so that you do not have to suffer this curse. It all begins in the 19th century in a small area of Indiana called Lafayette. At that time, American settlers were at war with various Indian tribes in order to colonize them. They managed to scare away many tribes, but one of the chiefs of an Indian tribe named Tecumseh decides to resist. He will bring together different Indian tribal leaders and organize a confederation to protect his lands and villages from settlers. Soon, Tecumseh will become a reputed and feared warlord. He won many victories against the American colonists, including against his feared future, General Harrison. Many reports also mention his incredible courage and report that his strength grew from war to war. The more victories he won, the more warlords wanted to join him to lend him less strength. But for the President of the United States and General Harrison, it represents a considerable danger, and it would therefore be important to eliminate it quickly. There will be many wars between the different camps, but one of them will remain historical, named the Battle of Tippecanoe. It was during this battle that the Indians suffered a bitter defeat against the American colonists. So to take revenge, and before he died, Tecumseh would have cast a spell. He would have cursed all those who had killed his people, and would have cast a terrible curse that would target the very symbol of oppression, namely the presidents of the United States. This curse would punish all US presidents for the deaths he could cause during various battles for the next 100 years. That any president elected a year ending in the number 0 would suffer this brutal curse before the end of his term. And for now, historically, we can say that this curse might be true, because every 20 years, there has actually been an American president who died a year ending in a 0. The first person who would have suffered this curse would of course be General Harrison, or the President of the United States Harrison Hemorrhagic Pneumonia, only 3 months later after being elected in 1840. The second person to suffer this curse will be Abraham Lincoln, who will be elected in 1860, and he was brutally murdered 5 years later. Then it will be around James Garfield, who will be elected in 1880 and who will be assassinated only a year later. Then came William McKinley, who was elected in 1900 and brutally assassinated only a year later. In 1920, it was the President of the United States Harding, who died only 3 years later under mysterious conditions, which many people talk about poisoning. Then Franklin Roosevelt, who will be elected President of the United States, and who died only 5 years later from a cerebral hemorrhage and only a few weeks after signing the Yalta Accords. Again, many will suspect an assassination to finish. This may be one of the most solid we know, namely, the assassination of Kennedy in 1968 and who had been elected in 1960. But then, whether for Harrison, Abraham, Nikon, Franklin Roosevelt or the Kennedys, the curse seems to have struck and killed them. After being elected a year ending with a 0 to finish in 1980, it will be Ronald Reagan's turn to be elected President of the United States. Legend has it that he would have succeeded in defeating the curse because he would not have died before the end of his term. Some will even say that it was when he survived an attack that he managed to break the curse. And the curse would indeed seem defeated because the next US presidents who were to undergo this curse would have been George Bush, but he did not die during his term, and the most recent was Donald Trump, and he also did not die during his term. So we may never know the truth about this curse, but the historical facts so much to prove that this curse did indeed exist. And that's it. This is the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Do not hesitate to tell me in the comments, and if you have other topics like that you want me to treat it in my next videos. If this video interested you, don't hesitate to check out my other videos. In the meantime, you can still like and share and subscribe. We'll meet again in the next video. That was